All right, we are live on the Instagrams. Camera one, camera two.
You're having too much fun.
And I'm having way too much fun. I'm an extrovert that is cramped up in this quarantine. You're fine. Long hair problems. Yeah, man, it's crazy. So we're here. We just put the kids to bed a few minutes ago, and we are going to be talking about some of these questions. So really quick, um, first, I should be recording this as a podcast, but I'm not. Whoops. But at any rate, back in December, like I said in my Instagram story, back in December, a bunch of you responded to a Instagram story that I did, and at the time I was doing some construction work over at the co-working space that we've been trying to launch for like a long time.
Yes.
And it's not quite launched yet, but we'll get there. And just really thinking about in this space, in the church space, space in Christianity, that really we have these questions that we don't feel like we should talk about. We feel like they're taboo. We feel like we can't, explain it. Like we can't chat about these things. And so you guys responded because I asked, what are some of those topics? What are some of those questions that you don't feel like you can talk about in a church setting around Christians? And I was going to make a podcast series about it. And at that time, I was working at a motorcycle dealership, Indian and Harley dealership, and I just did not have time. I had essentially 4 jobs rolling, and it just wasn't working out. So at any rate, I am talking about those now because I was reminded about those. I was reminded we were talking.
Yeah.
I don't remember what we were doing. We were talking, and like always, and was like, dude, I need to chat through some of these. So let's talk through some of them. And I'm gonna save this video. It will be available on the feed later too. So if you're watching and anything comes up, don't worry about it. I'm gonna save it afterwards. So, but I have Lindsay here to help me out.
Do you want me to hold this?
I don't know.
You can. Okay.
Am I cutting you off?
No.
Okay. So here's one of the questions that was talked about. Is hell a real place? Somebody asked if hell was a real place. And the answer is yes. Hell is a real place. People are living in it right now while they're alive. People are living in hell right now in places all over the world. If people aren't afforded the basic needs of life, if that is a struggle, if that is not readily available, that is hell. If someone is owned by another person and being forced to sell their body for someone else, that is hell. If people are being constantly manipulated and put into situations where they are unable to think for themselves, act for themselves, be themselves fully and truly, that is hell. So yes, hell is real. People are experiencing it right now. So I know that sometimes whenever hell is brought up, it's like a super controversial topic. I'll mention that that's kind of like the first sort of real deconstructionist topic I've noticed.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the first thing that puts people into an all-out questioning of their faith, which we'll get to that in a little bit too. But that is like the tipping point, I think, for people when they think about a truly loving God sending people to a physical, maybe not physical, depending on your understanding of resurrection, but an eternal conscious torment. So as far as afterlife,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there's a hell. What about you? I don't know. I've kind of ranted here for a minute.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That was like the first thing that I was deconstructing on was the idea of hell. But yeah, I think it's something that's definitely present right now. That's happening for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of goes into also like demonic forces and the devil and Satan and all of that. I mean, I really think that, um, you know, it's really hard right now because Lindsay and I were talking about this the other day because we're talking about like, is Satan, is the devil just simply the ego? Like, is that the egoic self
Mm-hmm.
that we have attributed that to or not? But as far as hell being a real place with this entity named Satan that rules over it, that it is, making people suffer forever and ever, I think that there's not a whole lot of merit for that.
Yeah.
I think that, um, but I will say too, this is live, so this is kind of hard. I'm just kind of rolling with it here. And I'm not like planned what I was gonna say. I'm just kind of riffing. Um, but people do believe in hell still, and I think that that's something that I've come to also is just because I don't believe in, I think hell is something that's happening on the earth right now. I don't think it's something that happens after you die. Even though I hold to that, I completely respect the fact that other people might still believe in an eternal conscious torment. Um, for me, it was moving from eternal conscious torment to um, moving from that place into a place of annihilationism, and then from annihilationism to universalism. That's was my sort of trajectory, and I think that there's another view of afterlife too. I'm not as versed in, so I'm not going to pretend like I know about it. But I think that what I've grown to learn is that everybody needs to have the freedom to believe what they think is best. Now, I believe that someone thinking in hell, as being an eternal conscious torment, I think that is just plain and simple not in line with the character of God and nature of God. So I have a hard time accepting that at all. But I did at one point in time, and I'll never forget the time that I was reading the scripture in Luke that was supposed to be like like the slam dunk for hell. You know what I mean? It was supposed to be like the slam dunk for hell, and I was reading it and I'm like, that's just not what I see here at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just don't see what I'm supposed to see here. And I remember thinking, well, I guess I'm just gonna accept that because that's what I'm supposed to see. Uh, and then so believe that for a little bit longer. Like I said, moved into annihilationism. That means that people, once they are dead, if they are not in Christ, then they just simply cease to exist. They are annihilated, completely separated, meaning that they are non-existent anymore. They are perished. John 3:16 says that those will perish but not have eternal life. So that's kind of the famous argument for that. But then I look more towards you know, in a sort of a universal sense of universal reconciliation, right? And that's where I think this other question, was Jesus' death sufficient for all? Yeah, yeah. I think that, first of all, Jesus' death was more so about, um, Jesus' death was more so about being a scapegoat more so than anything else. He was a problem to the religious elite and a problem to the political, agenda. And so the best thing you can do is get rid of a guy like that. And so Jesus' death, I don't know that it paid a price. I don't know there was a debt to be paid. I think that he was a martyr for what he believed was the right, true way of being in divine union. And that sets an example for us to mimic that in our life, that we live in a union with the divine, and we believe and live in liberation to the point of death. Um, but I'm ranting and raving.
There's a comment on there. I
Okay,
don't know if you.
I know. I kind of get just going. Religion is live, right?
Lived by people who are afraid of hell. Spirituality is lived by people who have been through hell and come.
Yes, yes. I love
Richard
that
Rohr.
Richard Rohr quote. Yes, totally. I think that there's a definite distinction between the religious understanding of it and the spiritual understanding of it. And I think I should mention too, while I'm ranting and raving, religion literally means to bind together. And I think that we're so quick to throw out religion too, but religion binds us together in a particular spirituality. That's what religion is.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, Hindus have a particular way of interpreting and understanding uh, their Hindu spirituality. Now, there's a lot of different ways, just like in the Christian faith, there's a lot of different traditions. But ultimately, it's under this bigger umbrella. They're bound together by some sort of general foundation, right? So Christians, there's a bunch of different Christians. I mean, many Christians would physically fight me over the words that I've already said in this live video,
Mm-hmm.
but I live my life in the pattern of Christ, and because I'm a friend of Christ, therefore I'm a Christian. So, it's like I am bound together in that faith because of, the particular spirituality that I practice. So that's something about religion too, is that you're bound together through a particular way of having faith. So, just a quick little correction, I think, to religion. Religion gets a lot of crap, and it should, in some regards, but it also shouldn't be completely neglected. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, once again, I'm hogging.
No, that's interesting to me. I'm tracking.
She's being nice because we're on a video.
No.
You're totally just being nice. I'm totally like not live videoing, right? This is not the way.
Really?
I'm preaching at people through this video right now. Like you're the one that noticed the comment here and everything. I'm just like
No, it's good.
Okay.
It's good. Let's do the next
All
question.
right, okay, so final thought about hell. Final thought about hell is hell a real place? That was the question that was asked. Yes. Is it an afterlife place? In my opinion, no. So, nobody said anything about afterlife on here, and I'm biting my tongue to riff on afterlife right now, but I'm not going to riff on afterlife right now.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it.
All right. I'll hold you to it.
All right. Let's see. We were kind of talking about this a second ago. Somebody wanted to talk about substitutionary atonement. I don't think that penal substitutionary atonement, I don't believe that is the ultimate doctrine of Jesus' death. I think that when we approach any sort of doctrine and when we really put our thumb on this is what it is, I think that we need to be careful about that a little bit because we are just putting together pieces. Like, I think using the word theory makes people really nervous, but really all of the doctrines that we put together truly are a sense of theory. I mean, it's what we think about this. It's our best understanding by putting the pieces of the puzzle together to make some sort of systematic sense of the thing. And I think we need to be careful about how much we marry ourselves to theory without really allowing life and spirit to dictate that. I mean, even Jesus himself says, you search the scriptures, for in them you think you have life. And I think we're still doing that today. So I think that they think that you have life through doctrines, but what we have to understand is that, like, any sort of doctrine is just our best guess at what we think what might be happening here. And so spirit, I think, is bigger and more beyond that. So penal substitutionary atonement, for those that you don't know, this is the really, like, the most basic way I think I can put it is that there was in the beginning that God created humanity in his image and likeness in perfection, and then as Genesis 3 came and they were separated, they were fallen away. Penal substitutionary atonement says that Jesus paid a debt for that sin that happened back in Genesis 3 to make us right with God. And so the only way that us sorry humans can be okay in God's sight is by the blood that paid a debt to God. And so I just don't think that the cosmos and the God of the universe is set up like a judicial system of checks and balances. I don't think that's, if we're talking about grace, I don't think that's how grace works. Grace says if you have a debt, it's covered, period. And so that puts a stipulation on that. It says you can have, it's grace is a free gift of God if you accept that that blood has paid some sort of outstanding debt. True grace says the debt was an illusion the whole time. There was not a debt. There was not a separation. But even in the midst of illusory separation, that true oneness has already been there the whole time. And I think Jesus has shown us that atonement at one mint didn't happen on the death of a cross. At one mint happened as the incarnation of his life. That there was a sense of Jesus living in a pattern in a particular way that showed us that prior to any death, prior to any resurrection, that there was a sense of oneness with God that was achievable, attainable, and absolutely meant for our life. That wasn't a prerequisite on some sort of debt being paid by blood. I think that's all metaphor for the way that Jewish folks could understand Jesus' death in some way that was meaningful because of that system of sacrifice that was already set up. I don't think that that was something to be doctrinalized and held on to for 2,000 years. I think Jesus showing that he is the ultimate sacrifice, certainly ultimately sacrificed his life for liberation and freedom, but I don't think that was paying a debt on humanity's behalf. And if it was paying a debt on humanity's behalf, if it did, I believe it paid for it all. And so I think that there is no one or nothing that is outside of reconciliation. So I think that penal substitutionary atonement is not the best way of understanding it. I think it actually it makes something that's much more sweeter and much more grand and much more engaging and inclusive. I think it makes all of that not nearly as much so. Does that make sense? So.
What?
I'm sorry, Lindsay. Hi, Haley. Sup? Man, I get on these
No,
not
it's
rabbit,
great.
I get on these mental, like, what would you call it? Like, I just
You
start
just focus
riffing.
in.
I just start riffing, and it doesn't stop. It's crazy.
You get tunnel vision.
Totally. It's I get in the zone.
Yes.
I get totally in the zone, and I just have to say it. All right. Next one. How do you justify the fear complex within Christianity? I don't justify the fear complex within Christianity. Mind you, this had a note on it too, that this was from her boyfriend who is Buddhist. So her boyfriend who is Buddhist asked, how do you justify the fear complex within Christianity? Well,
What does that mean exactly?
it means that sadly Christianity has positioned itself on its success is positioned on instilling fear into people for their allegiance to that religion.
Okay.
And so I totally, even though I'm a Christian, right? I really don't think that fear might get people to raise their hands. Fear might get people to give money. Fear might make it grow in such a way that seems like it's a sort of like explosive growth, but it's never something that's going to be lasting, because love casts out all fear. Perfect love casts out all fear. And if perfect love casts out all fear, then you cannot have a religion that foundational basis is that of inclusive love. It cannot and will not sustain in partnership with fear. It will be one or the other. And I think that Christianity has completely bowed its head to the tactic of fear, sometimes unknowingly and unwillingly. And we have completely set up whole institutions and systems that have had fear being the thing that runs the whole boat. And it's completely lost its track from the foundational root of love that it was based on in the life of Jesus. So, I don't know. What do you any thoughts on fear in Christianity?
No. You said it very well.
I hate that.
I'm just still processing. I'm thinking.
Okay.
If I have something to say.
All right. Well, I wanted you to come on and talk about this stuff, but I'm not doing a very good job.
I probably should have read ahead. Been more prepared.
Me too. Okay. So, I'll skip down to one just really quick too. That somebody wrote, "How can a religion of love instill fear and hate?" And I think that goes back to what I was just saying a little bit. That when we set ourselves up for fear and hate, when we put ourselves as exclusive, we have completely undermined any ability to think that we have a religion of love. We don't have a religion of love then at that point. We have a religion that is something completely, and I agree with Rob Bell in saying, you're crazy to think that Jesus, came here to start some sort of new religion to exclude you from other people and other belief systems. That's not what Jesus came to do. He didn't come to start a new religion. And he came to show us that not only are we loved, but we can become love, and that oneness and unity with the divine is capable. He says, if you've seen the Father, you've seen me, and you will go and you will be and do the same. So we have the ability to walk into the Trinity ourselves. Rabbit trailing and ranting. You guys are great. Thanks. Thank you. I think Lindsay's definitely great.
Well, thank you.
And I think that I need to learn how to share a little better. So thank you. I like your sweater, Luke. Thank you. I just wanted to say hi. Okay, bye. See ya. I get it. You don't like talking about this sort of stuff. Thanks for your support, though, Haley. Thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Let's see. I know that whenever we save this and put it on the feed, nobody's going to see the comments, by the way. So
I didn't know that.
I should be better at reading them fully so people can hear what the questions on the live feed are too. So that's cool. I should do that. Let's see. Let's talk about this one for a second.
Okay.
Biblical contradictions and literal interpretations in inerrancy. Mm-hmm. So whenever I originally posted this, somebody commented on the Instagram stories, and they said, can you speak to the contradictions in the Bible? Can you speak to people holding to literal interpretations? And I think if I remember exactly how they said it right, like the problem of inerrancy.
That's a lot.
And so I'm like, yeah, that's a whole lot. That's a podcast episode in and of itself. But I'm going to let Lindsay speak to it first.
Oh, I need to think for a second. I have to process. I'll let you start.
Of course. But as soon as I'm
more of a person that has to read ahead. I should have prepared. I should have read ahead.
As soon as I start riffing, that's it. That's it, dude.
Well, I'll jump in if I...
All right. Just seriously, tap me on the shoulder or something.
I will.
Because I get a tractor beam, just sort of...
I will.
Okay. So, first of all, there's tons of contradictions in the Bible. And anybody that wants to say otherwise, frankly, they're fearful in even picking at that scab, if you will. Because people think that if you let that go, if you let go of, or if you admit that the Bible is contradicting itself, people think that somehow their whole faith's going to fall apart. And it might, but
Yes.
for a good reason. And it can always be put back together in a way that is so much better. I could really analogy on that, and then Lindsay will definitely have to tap me here. But for lack of, so I won't riff forever on this, but I think that acknowledging biblical contradiction is acknowledging the fact and the beauty of humanity in the mix and in union with God. That the reason I think that we should embrace contradiction and error in the scriptures is to embrace the fact that humans have been one and interacting with the divine for a long time, and actually error is part of the human experience. Perfection has never been the purpose of this whole thing. The Hebrew culture didn't have a real concept for true perfection in that way. There was actually beauty in mystery. There was beauty in the unknown. There was actually a way of looking at life that when it didn't fully connect, that meant that we were going to have to dig into it deeper than what met the eye. We were going to have to actually engage God in a deeper way if we ran across things that weren't perfection. And I think that, people of Middle Eastern, religion, we've made Christianity such a Western religion, but originally, the Hebrews and the early Christians, and if you want to go even not just Middle Eastern, but Eastern, if you want to look at, Buddhists and Hindus and Taoists, there's such beauty in the way things naturally are. And humans naturally have a sort of contradictory paradox nature to them. There are things that I hold in tension within myself. That's part of the human experience. So contradictions within the scriptures are simply tensions held within itself that gives it a more rounded understanding of what is trying to be, talked about here. Like if you look at the Taoist, if you look at yin and yang, those are two opposite things that are in unison working together for one common whole good. And that's exactly what I think contradictions in the Bible can do too, is we can see differences, we can see error, and we can say that this is evidence of the beauty that happens when humans are doing the best with what they have in the moment in that given time. That perfection was never the aim to begin with, but wholeness is always the aim. And that comes only through embracing the paradox that will always be present. So I think biblical contradictions are not something to be avoided. They're something to be embraced and admitted. If people aren't admitting some of these things, then you should probably be careful. I'm from the Vineyard Church movement. It's a very, third wave charismatic Jesus people movement or whatever. But the leader of the movement, his name was John Wimber, and he said, don't trust a leader that doesn't walk with a limp. And I think that's important. You can't trust a leader that doesn't walk with a limp. Somebody that's not been through hardship, been through trial, and willing to admit the difficulties of some of this thing. You can't trust somebody. And so if you are under leadership that is not admitting some of the differences in the Bible, the contradictions, and that is hell-bent on a literal understanding and inerrancy, I think it's hard to trust that person, because they themselves are not giving themselves the ability to have some sense of tension and paradox within themselves. So that's my 2 cents on that. I think that we have to admit within ourselves and within our faith the tension. And things don't have to be literal, I love when people say, do you read the Bible literal? I'm like, well, I literally read the Bible if that's what you mean,
Yeah.
But I really I don't think this book was meant to be taken as a science book.
More poetic, right?
Yes.
And storytelling of yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to think of the
Riff.
I can't riff like you.
Come on, riff.
I can't. But just more poetic. Yeah, that's how I always think of it. Especially the older stories, like in the Old Testament and stuff. Like I feel like a lot of it was painting a larger picture, and I don't think it's all literal. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Or at least it's a admitting that it's a one-sided interpretation of the reality of what was happening through the Hebrew
Yeah.
lens. I think when we read other ancient texts from around the same time, we get to see a more full picture
Mm.
of what was really happening. Not to mention the creation narratives. Like the one that we get in Genesis that was passed down through the ages. That Moses would have penned, uh, most likely, but that Abraham would have picked up from Sumerian culture, which other cultures had the same sort of creation narrative and global flood and all that, jazz. Like you begin to see a more fuller picture whenever you can look at other interpretations of things that were happening at that same time too. So, um, yeah, I think that's, I don't know, riffed on that for a little bit. Inerrancy, though, really quick. I got to just touch on that a little bit more. Inerrancy was not something that came around until really the late 1800s and solidified more so in like the 30s. So we're looking at like maybe 150 years tops of the idea of biblical inerrancy, and that's directly connected with the Western Enlightenment and the uprising of science and things only needing to be believed that could be uh, proved with empirical evidence. And so we, as people of faith, had to scramble to figure out how we were going to get people to keep buying the book and buying our message. And so we had to emphasize the fact uh, of its inerrancy, that it didn't have a sense of error, because science didn't have error. Therefore, if we were going to combat that group, we had to say that our book didn't have errors either, which both have errors. There is science that's been debunked. That I mean, we thought cocaine was a great remedy, for colds and flus. That's science. You know what I mean? And I love science, and I hope that
Yeah.
if anybody's been following me for half of a second, you'll know that I'm definitely embracing of science. But I don't think that everything has to be based on that. And so,
Mm-hmm.
inerrancy of Scripture is a white knuckled attempt to try to combat something based on your ego, based on insecurity, and based on a lack of faith. Believing in inerrancy is lack of faith, in my opinion. Um, you don't need the Bible is an amazing and great tool, but somehow it's wedged itself into the Trinity, um, and it doesn't have a place there. It's a tool. It's not. Uh, the Word of God is something that comes to us in meditation and prayer and things. This is the book of God. Bible literally means book. This is a book. It's a book that's set apart. Holy Bible. It's set apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's different than other sort of texts, but it is still a text. Um, so we need to treat it as such. Be honest about it. It has errors. It has contradictions. That doesn't mean that it's uh, not something that should be trusted. Um, but I think that faith and spirituality um, cannot be bound to a binding
Yeah.
of a book.
We talked about that the other day, right?
Yep.
When we were on the walk.
Yeah.
Talking about the place that you hold, the Bible and where that is with all the other things that we do in our lives, with spiritual practices um, and all of that. Same thing. It's really good.
Yeah. You want to say more?
No.
You want to say more?
No, I don't.
Come on.
I hate when you do that.
Oh man. Riffs on riffs, dog. Riffs on riffs. Dude, thank
That's
you so
awesome.
much. Yeah, I mean, so good. I mean, just riffage. I used to play in a hardcore band, and we would just write riffs, and sometimes this is how like I feel like I'm doing that in a different way
Yeah.
right now, because we used to just like riff on like just random stuff that would
I
come to our
remember.
mind. We've been together since we were 17, so we're
Yes.
30 now. Um, so yeah, so I feel like definitely like I'm in the basement writing guitar riffs in my head. You know what I mean? Like breakdowns and blast beats and everything. Um, it doesn't look that exciting. Is it? Okay. Um,
I was questioning, right?
okay. Let's do that one too. Well, maybe these can be married together a little bit. Religious exclusivity is
Oh,
one of the
that's
questions. How do you reconcile religious exclusivity? The other question is, or the other thing that they said is, how is questioning beliefs? How is questioning your beliefs taboo? Question mark. So
mm.
people are saying like this one individual, and I think they don't really have as much experience in a formal Christian tradition. So I think it's really true that it seems weird to people outside of Christian circles. It seems weird to them that we would hinder curiosity. And I agree at this point. Like, it's definitely a taboo, or it shouldn't be a taboo, to question the things that you've been handed. I think once again, like science, the way that science has evolved is because some scientists has done work on the previous scientists' work and said, I think that they might have missed a little bit here or there, and they've built on that. And so I think questioning your faith isn't that you're going to decimate your faith. I think if we changed it to the reality that if you question your faith and you go through that deconstruction and then choose to start some sort of reconstruction, now you're building on your faith.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just tearing it apart and leaving it torn apart. You're rebuilding your faith. You're and that's why I think it's taboo, because people in churches think if you take your faith apart, that now somehow you've backslidden and you're not going to be strong in your faith anymore. And I think that that's not true. If you tear something down to rebuild it, it's usually going to be a stronger thing. When a bone breaks and it heals back, it's stronger. Like when my motorcycle engine is getting worn out and I break down the top end to rebuild, the piston and rings, it's going to have more compression when I put it back together. The same is true for our faith. It should not be something that's fearful to take apart and say, the rings are worn out and the piston's got some slap in the cylinder. We need to, put a new cylinder or a piston in it and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I'll really riff on motorcycle stuff for a little bit. I promise I won't. But the point is that like we, or even songs, like being in bands, like we would write a song and it would be okay, but when we would revisit that song after about 6 months of playing shows with it, we'd be like, oh man, like we were comfortable enough with it that we could take it apart. And I think taking apart your faith means that there is some sort of comfortability with your faith to begin with. Or I think that would be something that's encouraged. Richard Rohr talks a lot about this. He talks about that there needs to be something constructed to deconstruct, and that deconstruction can be very not helpful for people that haven't created or taken seriously some sort of faith to begin with.
Mm.
We have to take a faith seriously to begin with in order to then take it apart and put it back together. I'm obsessive. Can you agree?
Yes.
I get really obsessed. I've been obsessed with faith and religion for the past decade or more. And because of that, like I've known that I'm going to build upon this thing even whenever it feels like I've taken it apart. That it's seasons of that. So I should slow down and read some of these comments. Yes, building on the faith. And I should repeat these comments for the recording too, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sorry, people. Yeah, it's just something that's being built on.
Yeah.
And I think too, questioning your faith is taboo because that means that you're going to question authority. You're going to question the authority of not only the scripture of Jesus, if you're a Christian, but now you're going to question the authority of your church leaders, of your elders, of your pastors. And frankly, that's not good for business. It's not good for you to not have some sort of ultimate faith in them. And so.
And nor do some of them even feel like I think they have the answers.
That's true.
I think.
Yep, that's true. I mean, yeah, totally. Like, whenever I was a youth pastor, like, kids would text me at all times of the night, Lindsay knows, with the most far out questions, Dan. And
I love it, though.
I know, it's so good. I'd be like, laying in bed and it'd be like midnight on a Friday night, and people are, like, kids are texting me.
It was good for us.
It was really good.
Really challenging and good.
And, I never discourage students from asking deep, good questions, because people are wondering why people are leaving the church in droves. Well, it's because you've not given them a space for liminality. You've said you either have to have it figured out, or you either don't. You need to not have it figured out so we could figure it out for you. And we don't create space for liminality. And I would never lie to a student if I didn't have an answer. For those 5 years being a youth pastor, never once did I just BS an answer to them. If I didn't know, I would tell them, I don't really know about that. Don't know what to tell you. Or I'd say, like, let me read a book in the morning because it's 1 a.m. right now. And I'll get back to you, But I would never do that, because I knew that curiosity that is bottled will always explode. Curiosity is like shaking, a LaCroix. If you open, it's at some point, it's going to have so much tension and pressure in it, it's just going to explode. Maybe LaCroix isn't the best analogy. I'm riffing here, people. It's like a gas can in the summertime, and you don't have the little cap on the back off of it, and it's like expanding in that gas can, and it's going to explode if you don't give it a pressure release valve. And so I think that us, in our minds, when we don't have the release valve for our curiosity, we either explode, or we get stale and we just die in the gas can, and we lose all of our octane. If you don't have that, it's going to lose its octane. And so anyways, I think the reason that it's taboo is because some sense of control. And I think that this religion, Christianity, is based on freedom and liberation. And Jesus came to teach us freedom and liberation by the way of living in wholeness and oneness with God. He would say the Father. That was culturally relevant for him. Maybe that doesn't work for you, to use that sort of language, but, give it a little bit of slack, it's 2,000 years ago, Near East culture, right? So, even using the term Father was progressive at that point in time. I won't riff on that. But the point is, if it doesn't result in freedom and liberation, then I don't think it's of Jesus. I don't think it's Christ. I don't think it's Christian. I think that if it's not in freedom, liberation, wholeness, unity with divine, I like the way Peter puts it in 1 Peter, of divine participation. If it's not an invitation to greater divine participation, then it's probably not something that's going to be beneficial for your spiritual life. And so, keeping people in lower levels of their spirituality, not questioning their beliefs, not building on it, even, I think gives people a sense of authority and power over you. And I don't think this was a religion of authority and power, despite what we've made it in the Midwest, in the Western American world. Any other thoughts on questioning your beliefs and why that's a taboo, Lindsay?
Don't do that again. No, I don't know. I think that was all really good. I agree. And I think a lot, like I said before, like I think a lot of people, they don't have the answers themselves, and they're fearful to open up those topics because it just if you don't feel equipped for something and you can't answer it, it's just, I don't know, it
Right.
can be disastrous, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge fear of a lot of churches and stuff, of what could come out of that.
Yeah.
um,
Word. Totally agree on that.
We're
Okay.
having too much fun with this.
I'm totally riffing. Okay. One more here, folks, and then we're gonna skedaddle. The religious exclusivity piece, and that goes with another question. I don't know if I wrote it down on here or not, but somebody was just saying, essentially, how does that work? Like, so religious exclusivity. Another one that I didn't write down because it was so similar to this was like, why does Christianity think that it's the only? And so I think like we're prone to that. Like I think everybody is prone to thinking whatever they have figured out to be truth as being like the universal truth. I don't think Christianity is the only religion for that. I think that in the West we think that Christianity is the only one that has sort of uh, a dominating factor to it, but we actually aren't. Um, I think we're just annoyed with hearing that how Christian is dominating everything, right? Like, I don't want to get political at all, right? But it's like, the fact that like, Trump is uh, all for like evangelicals and the Christian faith and stuff like that, or you have a lot of the stuff that's going on in Europe right now, in Ukraine, and the government, like Christianity, the Catholic Church trying to weasel its way into, the politics and domination there, right? Like we have this idea, the exclusivity and the superiority that Christianity has. We only think about that through our paradigm. But I was on the phone a month ago with my friend in India. He's lived in India. He's one of my dad's friends. He's a lot older than me, but he was from India. He lived in the Bronx in New York, and then was with my dad in Florida and Miami for years, and then he went back to start a church in India, and has been in India for the better part of 25, 30 years. And I was on the phone with him, and he was talking to me just about how his church in India is a Christian church. He's with the Vineyard too, a church that I was a part of. And so he was telling me that that their church is having a lot of hard time right now. The government is trying to shut their church down, and I was like, "Why is the government trying to shut your church down?" He said, "Oh, it's the Hindu. What's the word? The exact phrase that he used?
I remember you saying this.
I'm
The word.
spacing the word. We use it we use it for Christianity here in the United States. This isn't good.
I know.
Mind
This word
blanking.
describes it perfect.
Yeah, it describes it so perfectly. But dang, this is so not helping my story right now.
I know.
But essentially, it's the Hindu government is the government is influenced by Hinduism, and I'm good with Hinduism, obviously, so like, Neem Karoli Baba like completely changed my mind on Jesus Christ, and he's a Hindu guru. Okay, so cut me a little slack here for any of you new folks that are just joining us, but the government in India right now doesn't want any other religious institution other than Hinduism where they're at. So his Christian church, he has 5 different Christian churches that he pastors and has helped start, and they're trying to shut all their doors from a legal standpoint because they do not want Christianity in their region. And so I think that, once again, we're not the only religion. Christianity is not the only religion that seeks to abolish all other religions that are, with it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like in America, we do see Christianity being the dominating religion and pretty much looking at everything else as, second class and not truth and everything. But there are other areas in the world, like my friend in India that I just talked to a month ago, where it's the same thing that's happening there, but just flipped. It's with Hinduism, right? And so we've seen Buddhism become militant in China, right? Like there are definitely other areas of the world that get their own sort of religious exclusivity. So we're not the only religion that has that. All religions get that way because, once again, I think people are prone to thinking whatever their truth is should be the truth for all people. That's sort of a fault of the human condition, is projection. For whatever has been for us should be for other people, and we go around shoulding on people, and your should gets everywhere, man, and your should make things really messy, and we shouldn't should on everybody all the time, because we're going to only we'll only see a one-sided linear version of a narrative. And so to speak to the other question here, just about why does, well, I guess I kind of answered that, but why does Christianity see itself as the best? Well, anybody that thinks they have some sort of crack on what is truth thinks they are. Mm-hmm. But I'll just end with this. I don't think that there is an exclusive religion. I think, for me, Christianity is my heritage. And I've said this in podcasts before. First and foremost, because I'm an American. I was born in Florida and grew up in Indiana, and now we're living here in California, and it's like, still, we're like, our whole experience has been American. And so I'm a Christian by virtue of being an American. I'm also a Christian because I was born into a pastor's house. You know what I mean? I was born into a Christian family. Mm-hmm. I was trained in Christianity. I was still am ordained, right? So it's like,
we hold the traditions close to us too.
Yeah.
I mean, the practices.
Right, and I find a lot of liberation and freedom through the narrative of Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, so, but do I think that is the primary and only way that people can have a transcendent experience with the Spirit of God? No. Do I think that that's the only way that God interacts with and pulls people into an understanding of their unity with Him? No. Because I believe that the Spirit knows no boundaries. And just like if you look at planet Earth from space, you don't see the border from Mexico to the United States to Canada. You don't see the borders of all the regions within Europe. You don't see all the provinces in all the different spaces in Australia. You don't see all of that. And when you get to a higher vantage point in spirituality, you begin to see that all of those lines and all of those divisions begin to become invisible because they are illusions. They're not truly there. That the divine knows no boundaries, mm-hmm. just as geography knows no border. And it's your perspective, it's your vantage point. It's how high up are you? No pun intended, right? Like, how high up to the heavens do you get to see the fact that all are created as one? That certainly there's nuance and difference. If you're in space and you're looking down, absolutely the Alps in the winter are going to look a lot different than if you look down to the Sahara Desert. Of course, there's going to be nuance and difference that you can see from that vantage point. But that isn't to say that there are distinct differences in those things. So I think that there are differences in our religions, like, for sure. Like I said, you're going to see the Alps, you're going to see the snow, you're going to see the Sahara Desert, you're going to see the Mediterranean, you're going to see all of these things. But it's not to say that it isn't collectively something greater and a bigger entity that could be at work in all of those cultures and things, that is bringing everyone and everything to an awareness of oneness with God through the living Spirit. So for me, that means identification with Christianity. And I learn from certainly a plurality of religions, but for me, my rootedness, my calling, my focus is from a Christian perspective and experience. But I'm not naive enough to think that I could say that God is limited to that and will only work through that way. I think that is one of the biggest egotistical things that man can do, is to define for God who God accepts by what method and mode. I think that is the biggest arrogance that we could ever come up with. And religion does that well, and I don't think that was the purpose of religion. So, what do you think? Like I'm paying her to just sit here and tell me that it's good. I'm just riffing. I'm sorry.
We're quarantined together. We're stuck together
I know.
now. So, no, I think that's love. All that, like, God's in all of it, and it's all connected.
Yes.
And the more you study all of the different beliefs and things like that, you see where it all connects.
Yes. There's a golden thread that streams through everything that is pulling it all together. And I love Ram Dass. I was listening to his teaching on the Bhagavad Gita about a year ago, and he was saying, if I'm going to try to logically make the religions fit together and work together, I will frustrate myself to the end of time. Like, they aren't going to fit together like a puzzle or like Legos. That's not how it's not. Like, if you're going to try to mash up how you see, Krishna, or if you're going to mash up, all of the writings and teachings of Lao Tzu from Taoism, like into the Abrahamic religions, even within the Abrahamic religions, right? Like, it's not all going to fit together like that. It's not going to be this Pangea thing where it's like, oh, if you just zoom out far enough, you can see where South America went over into Africa. Like, it's going to kind of be like that, but not. That might actually be a decent example. I don't know. Riffing. Yeah. But the point is that, like, it's not going to fit together like a puzzle, but you're going to see the nuance and the thing that streams the essence of all of those religions together.
Universal truths, I think. Maybe.
Yes, it's when you look beneath the curtain, when you look behind the curtain, rather, you begin to see this divinity in all of these things that culture and humanity have interpreted and have put down in tradition, but you begin to see the heart behind them and appreciate the symbolism behind them, and you begin to find yourself even in them, in all the complexities of you in all of these other religions and spaces. And so it's like, you just see, I think essence is so much more important than just sheer sort of like laid out doctrines or dogma. You know what I mean? So that's that.
Yeah.
Damn.
2 minutes. I can't believe it's been an hour.
We riffed for way too long. Nobody's ever gonna watch all this. Nobody's ever gonna watch all this. Holy crap. If you've been with us for this whole hour, man, thanks for hanging out. But well, I guess we're forced to be signing off here. Any parting words, Lindsay?
Next time I'm gonna read the questions ahead of time.
Next time I'm not.
Yeah.
Riffer. Little side note here for anybody that's still watching. Almost every single podcast I've ever done has just been a big riff. So I guess cat's out of the bag on that one. I just have an idea and I just hit record and riff. I don't make notes or anything, but I don't know. Maybe that'll change. So, all right, we're getting booted off here by Instagram. So, see ya. I'm gonna save this and I'll throw it up on YouTube if anybody wants to watch some of it later. So, all right. See ya, everybody.
See ya.
Take it easy.